Well, this is the final session, the final lecture in Fundamentals of Physical Geography, and I just want to run through a few key points to remind you of what we've been doing during the module, what you've learned, and also just to say a few words about what happens next, what opportunities are available to you as you move forward from this module into the rest of your geography, physical geography, GGE courses at Keele. So what have you achieved and where can this take you? Well, first of all, congratulations, we're in step 12, right at the end of this this first semester module. For most of you it's been one of the first modules you've taken at university, so well done, congratulations on a successful first semester. And that successful first semester opens up lots of opportunities for you, not least moving forward into second semester. A lot of you will be carrying on doing more physical geography work in second semester, into second year and third year as you move into more specialist options to complete your degree. Maybe some of you will go on to postgraduate study in this area. Maybe, well, I imagine a lot of you will be going on into careers that involve the kind of work that you've just embarked on now as you get to know physical geography as a discipline. Don't forget, as you move forward, Keele is very flexible in its degree program, so you still have opportunities to shift and change your, not only your option modules, but even to change your degree programs. So if you want to move from a combined honours course into a single honours, or if you want to focus it as a major pathway in your third year, opportunities such as that are available for you at this stage. So do talk to me or to your personal tutor about those different opportunities. So the first thing I want to really talk about today, and the thing I want to focus on, I'm not going to dwell on it too long, I'll rattle through a bit because you can pause the video, you can rewind and think about the things in more detail that you really want to focus on. But I just want to make the basic point to begin with, that we've looked at physical geography, we've looked at the physical environment of the Earth's surface at a variety of different scales. And if you had to summarise for someone, well, what was this module all about? What have you learnt? What have you taken away from this module? I guess I'd say that was the big thing. You should have taken away from this module at least a basic understanding of the physical environment of the Earth's surface and how that works and what kinds of processes and events are going on in that Earth's surface environment. And we've done that both at a really broad scale, thinking about global energy material interactions and the big global systems and Earth as a planet in space, and the way that planetary context determines a lot of the things that happen at a global scale. We've also looked in much more detail at some specific case studies. We've focused, for example, on the ideas of surface processes and landforms, and particular types of landforms and landscapes in different environments. And we've seen all of that, both the broad context and the focused examples, if you like, within that context of environmental change. That's one of the points that we've made very strongly in this module, that the characteristics of the environment are what drive a lot of the processes that are controlling our local environments, but that environment that's controlling everything, well, that in itself is changing through time. So as the environment changes through time, the processes that are controlling things also change through time, and therefore landforms, landscapes, the world around us is constantly changing for all sorts of different reasons. So that big picture, that basic understanding of the physical environment of the Earth's surface, that really is what this module has been about. So as you move out of the module, move through the module and move on from the module, try to make sure that you have a clear understanding of that in your mind. So we've talked about a number of different global systems, things that are operating at a planetary scale. Plate tectonics, the thermohaline ocean circulation, the atmospheric circulation, aspects of the Earth as a planet that relate to its astronomical context, and systems that operate at a planetary scale. That's one set of material that this module has covered that you should now have some familiarity with. You should also have familiarity at a much tighter scale, if you like, with things that are happening in different regions of the Earth's surface. For example, we talked about biogeochemical cycles and ecosystems, and we talked repeatedly about geomorphology, the development of landforms and landscapes, and the evolution of landscapes over time, the interaction of energy on materials, processes happening in the environment, time passing and processes operating over the course of time. People who've looked at time almost as a driving force in geomorphology and in landscape evolution. There are a lot of different topics in there under that general heading of geomorphology or landscape change, a lot of different topics in there that you now know something about. It's really important as you move through the module to be aware of what you've learned. Sometimes at the end of a module like this, I say to a student, well, what did you learn? And they say, oh, well, not a lot really, because you forget how little you knew maybe at the beginning and how much of what you now almost take for granted as being part of physical geography is actually stuff that you've picked up during the course of this module. So don't underestimate how much you've learned, either about the big global stuff that we mentioned a minute ago, or about case studies such as this geomorphology case study that you're now familiar with. And thirdly, the third big point I made previously was you're familiar now at least with the broad aspects of environmental change, the fact that climate changes through time, some of the driving forces behind climate change, and some of the impacts of climate change, for example, on sea level change. So there are many different aspects of our global environment that have been changing over very long time scales because of natural causes, but also the nature of that change is being severely impacted now because of human causes as well. And that environmental change is a major context for everything else that you've been learning about in physical geography. So a really important thing for you to be able to do now is to pull out some key themes, key big ideas that you think you have learned or that you have drawn from studying this module, and then it's important for you to be able to add your own case studies to those big themes that you've identified. So I'm just identifying a handful here of what I think are the big themes that you certainly have learned something about in this module. You might agree with me that these are the big themes, or you might say, well actually no, there are other things that you've pulled out of the module other than what I was anticipating. And that's great, that's fine. Everybody's going to draw their own conclusions, draw their own points of particular interest from the module. So you should at this stage be adding additional key themes to this list of mine, and you should be adding specific examples both to my key themes and also to the additional themes that you're adding in to this list. So, the Earth's surface as an energy material environment. The relationships between processes and forms. Things changing over the course of time. And complex interactions between different components of the environment. For example, we talked a lot about feedbacks during the course of the module. So those are some big themes that you should, for each of those, be able to say, oh yeah, I've got an example of that. Oh yeah, I know what he means by that. Oh yeah, I've got something that resulted from that. Oh yeah, I know one of the driving forces behind my examples for those things. So I'm not going to spoon feed you all my examples for all those key themes. That's the measure now of how successfully you've negotiated the material in this module. You should be familiar with those themes, and examples or ideas related to those should be leaping out at you. If not, well, maybe go back and just watch through some of the videos again, think through some of the materials that we've given you again, and just remind yourself of what those big issues are, what those big themes are that we've been studying. That's really what the module is all about. It's not just about the fiddly detail, it's about these big ideas. Now, in particular, one of the big ideas, one of the big themes that I'm hoping that you've learnt as you've worked through this module, one of the things that's been prominent for you as you've worked through this module, and it's something that you can put to good use in the patchwork assignment as well, is the idea of connecting specific examples to big general themes. So any particular bit of information that you might have learnt about, we talked about drumlins right at the beginning of the module, you might have been interested in ants, or whatever it might be, anything at all in physical geography, your specific example that you've got interested in, your particular case study, well, that's an example or a case study or an illustration of some big general theme, and that's a connection that I want you to be making at this stage. All your little facts and figures, well, what do they relate to in terms of big themes? All your big themes, what are the specific facts and figures that illustrate those? So it's important for you to have an awareness of how specific details such as a landform relate to global issues such as environmental change. And we talked before about this is a world of basically a simple place, or is the world basically a really complex place? And we came up with the answer, well, it's both, and it depends partly on what scale you look at it at a short time scale or a long time scale, at a big spatial scale or a small spatial scale. And the closer you look, the more you see, the more complicated it becomes. Then it becomes simple again. You look even closer and it gets complicated again. And as you have been doing that, I hope, throughout the module, I hope that you've come to an understanding that all of the different examples that you've studied, rivers, glaciers, biogeochemical cycles, ocean tides and Coriolis force, all of the different examples that you've studied, they all work according to the same basic physical geography, environmental rules. And to understand the landscapes around us, it isn't a case of understanding 1,000 different little case studies, it's a case of understanding, broadly speaking, how this system works. And from that we can then work out to the individual case studies. You might never have studied karst landscapes, for example, limestone landscapes. We haven't really talked about that particularly in this module, but having studied other kinds of landscapes and having studied the big principles behind how landscapes work, energy and materials and so on, it really shouldn't take you long at all to get to grips with karst landscapes or tropical arid landscapes. And some new particular case study is going to be very easy for you to pick up once you've got the hang of the basic principles that we've been looking at throughout the module. So understand the basics, the big picture stuff, and the details will be easy to understand later on. If all you've got is detail, then you can get confused if you don't have that big picture framework to fix your details into. So here's just an example of that. I'm just picking a random case study of kind of volcanoes and plate tectonics, if you like, and I want to look at a case study, and then just illustrate how some piece of information from a case study points at a big general point. Again, I'll rattle through these, and I'm going to work on the assumption that you're going to pause the video and think about each slide, or go back and look at them again afterwards, after I've just rattled through them. So here's a picture of the distribution of volcanoes, and we can say that the distribution of volcanoes relates to the tectonic setting. Lots of volcanoes happen at plate boundaries, for example. Well, that's true, and it relates to a general point that you can apply in lots of other circumstances. And the general point here is that the geography of geomorphology is controlled by big forces. So here we've got volcanic geomorphology, the geography of volcanoes being controlled by plate tectonics. Well, what controls the geography of desert geomorphology or the geography of glacial geomorphology? In every other case, just as with volcanoes, there's some big picture controlling factor which is determining the geography of the landforms and landscapes and the geography of the geomorphology. Here's another one. The specific morphology or form of a volcano. Here's Chimborazo in Ecuador with its characteristic three-peak morphology there. Well, the form of that volcano relates to a very particular tectonic setting and history. It's the fact there's been a history of eruptions over the course of time, giving us these different components to that volcanic edifice that's given us a particular geomorphology, the particular shape of that volcano. Again, that applies in lots of other different situations, not just volcanoes. And we can make the general point that geomorphic forms, landforms, are controlled by geographically specific conditions. So for that particular volcano, it was the geographic specificness of the characteristics of a series of volcanic eruptions that gave that mountain its particular shape. Well, that applies to a glacial moraine or to a coastal landscape. Any kind of landform, its morphology is controlled by geographically specific conditions. Try and think of examples of these for other cases, as well as the volcanoes that I'm giving you. Here's another one. This is what's left of a volcanic landform after it's gone through lots of post-volcanic evolution. And I'll make the specific case here about my volcanoes case study to say, well, the form of a volcano or of a volcanic landform relates to site-specific processes that happen both during the initial volcanic activity, but also after the volcanic activity is finished and post-volcanic processes are operating. That's true in lots of different situations as well, and I'd make the general point, for example, that landforms in any context are controlled not just by something happening at one point in time, but by time transgressive processes, things happening over long periods of time, often different things happening at different stages in the evolution of an environment, in the evolution of a landform and a landscape. Another case study is Mount St Helens, that had a lateral blast that created a very specific set of events and a very specific set of landforms. And in our case study example there, we can say, that those processes occurring at Mount St Helens, well, they related to a very particular set of tectonic, a very specific tectonic context, very specific environmental conditions, very specific set of circumstances. Well, that's true in general. Geomorphic processes are part of a complex system that links geomorphology to lots of different environmental settings. We don't just look at a landform and understand it in isolation, we understand it in context with other surrounding landforms and landscapes and other factors in that big environment. You can't understand a volcano without understanding tectonics, climate, the passage of time, etc. And that's true for all sorts of other landforms and landscapes as well. So we're seeing these big general points that we can relate to particular little case studies, but we could relate them to case studies in lots of different parts of physical geography, and it's important that you're able to do that at this stage. So I've got to call it a do-it-yourself activity here. This is something for you to definitely pause the video or stop the video and come back later, or do this afterwards. But I'd like you to identify for yourselves what you think are the big themes, the big issues, the big stuff that came out of this module that you could identify as being big ideas in physical geography or big guiding principles in physical geography. And then for those big themes, those big ideas, what are your specific case studies that you can connect to them? So I want you to have the detailed case studies, of course, but I want you to tie them to big ideas. You can use my big ideas if you want to, or you can add to those or develop some big ideas of your own. And that's something I'd like you to do as part of this, this unit within the Fundamentals of Physical Geography module, is just identify for yourself what you think are the big controlling framework issues in physical geography. Well, that kind of is bringing us now towards the end of the module. That really is the finishing point for the module, that you're able to do something like that for yourselves. And like I said at the beginning of this little talk, there's a lot of forward steps for you now within physical geography. This is by no means should this be the end of physical geography for you. I know some of you are doing this module as part of a degree program which isn't actually geography, and you're incorporating a bit of physical geography into your program. But physical geography overlaps with lots of other subject areas. So if you're doing environmental science or environment and sustainability, physical geography reaches out into those discipline areas, and those disciplines reach back into physical geography. So I hope even if you're not a geography or physical geography student, you will continue to study physical geography topics as you move forward in your degree routes. Certainly if you are doing geography or physical geography, then what you've done in this module will be a good background, a good starting point as you move forward into next semester, into next year, and into the rest of your degree. There are opportunities for postgraduate study in physical geography here at Keele, so master's level or moving forward into a PhD. I hope that a proportion of you, each year a proportion of the students go on and do that, so I hope that's true for this year's cohort as well. And I'm sure by now you've got to know a number of staff who you can contact, either myself or other staff members, if you'd like to talk about that. Even though it's a few years ahead for you now, it's never too early to start thinking about that as one of the possibilities which is available to you. So, as always, if there are questions, I hope you'll please ask. Don't sit there worrying about something you don't understand or something you don't know. Just ask about it. There are lots of opportunities for you to ask questions. I know with this kind of video presentation, you can stop me and rewind me and play me again, but you can't actually ask me something right here and now. But you can drop me a line, send me an email. Better still, put a question or a comment up on the KLE discussion board, and I'll get back to that well, pretty much straight away, but as quickly as I can I'll get back to you and give you some feedback on that. Don't forget there's a final live Teams meeting. If you're watching this video as soon as it's produced for you in week 12, then at the end of week 12 on Friday we'll have our live Teams meeting. If you've missed that and you're a Keele Geography student, you can catch the recording of that through the KLE. But if in doubt, as always, if you've got any questions, please just ask. So it's happy Christmas time. You'll see I dropped the Christmas lights, so I was going to wear my Santa hat and Santa suit, but I couldn't find it. Sorry, I'll try and dig that out for Friday and our live Teams session. So come to the session on Friday, the live Teams session on Friday. Catch up on your reading, catch up on any sessions that you aren't up to speed with in terms of the 12 steps through the program. Revise the key issues. Do all the little activities that we've asked you to do through the module to make sure that you're completely up to completely in touch with all the ideas that we want you to be familiar with. Complete your assignment. You've got your patchwork assignment to work on through this week, over the Christmas holiday and into the new year. But make sure when you've done that, make sure you have a break and then come back next year rested and ready to go. So I hope to see most or all of you in the live session on Friday, but just in case I don't see you then, I'll say happy Christmas, and if you have any questions, please just get in touch and I'll do my best to help.